Well,
Who's more excited, you or Nate?
That's tough. That's tough. Yeah. I you know where I'm at. I'll save it for the show.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast. We are the Who Dat Jedi. I'm Aaron. Joined with me, as always, Dave and Fredo. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
I'd ask how you're doing, but we've been talking now for about 15 minutes. But here we are, Tuesday evening. Saints won against Jacksonville, and I love all the shots of Urban Meyer, just beside himself. Twitter went after it. There's not many people I dislike more than Urban Meyer. I don't know. It's just.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
It's not. That's what we've talked about. I think we talked about this before, where you talk to certain coaches and you understand how they were able to reach players, and it's like, oh, I get it. Like, this guy could reach anybody. I'm ready to run through a wall for this guy. Like, Meyer, never have got it. Snake oil salesman. It's just. But he's successful. But not last night.
Tell you what, and everybody's talking about the good game that Jameis had, but nobody's really talking about Marquez Callaway. Holy cow.
Oh, no. Did you see Chad Ochocinco tweeted at him saying, "I want your signed jersey"?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, today he was, so he's quickly developing a fan base, which kind of speaks to his skills and ability on display yesterday.
And by the way, it drives me crazy when everybody's demanding that Sean Payton, announce who the quarterback is going to be, and it's like, why would you do that? It goes. He had something in previous seasons, guys, we have a big game coming up against the Packers. First game of the season. Why would you give them 5 extra days to prepare? It's like, and who says that where is it I don't know, an amendment to the Constitution that says that your coach has to give the starting lineup, when you want it? I don't know.
I will always give the benefit of the doubt to the coach, because obviously they're there. They know the situation. They know more about football and they're pinky than any of us. So it's like, I will give them the benefit of the doubt. And in this situation, maybe Winston needs a little extra prodding in practice. I know that he's been workout warrior, kicking butt, but I think Peyton may think, I don't want to lose that over the next 2 weeks. That's a possibility as well. So yeah,
I still think it's a bigger deal of just, I'm not going to give Green Bay any extra help. So,
and just from the standpoint of, when you consider there's no pressure on him to announce a starter for another couple of weeks, so why even bring it up? We wanted, us as fans wanted to be resolved, because it's almost like we want that peace of mind of knowing.
But why?
No, again, I'm telling you, because we want to know that's our quarterback, that's our guy.
There are things that keep me up at night, but who is going to be the starting quarterback is not one of them.
You're not thinking about the jersey purchases, sir.
Well, it's not just that, but it's for the last 16 years, there's been 2 facts known about the Saints. Sean Payton was their head coach, and Drew Brees was their starting quarterback. And those 2 facts were unmutable, unchangeable, undeniable. We have entered a new era where one of those facts no longer applies, and everybody's freaking out because they want to get back to that terra firma of, okay, I know who my starting quarterback is.
It's almost like we're in the multiverse. All right, well, let's tonight we're going to be talking about basically all things Bad Batch, and we have some news about some non-Star Wars stuff. One non-Star Wars thing.
Kind of big.
But kind of big. Otherwise, we're going to be talking about Bad Batch, give our kind of reaction to the season. It's not going to be a episode by episode rundown. We're just going to kind of talk holistically. But let's start with some trivia. So I'll put on my old man glasses. And Dave, What pilot does Luke address his "I've been hit" transmission to before crash landing on Hoth? That's interesting. What pilot does Luke address his, quote, "I've been hit" transmission to before crash landing on Hoth? Ooh, I know.
I feel like Wedge was a part of that battle, so I'm going to guess Wedge.
Your answer is Wedge. It is Hobby.
Oh, yeah. He does mention... He mentions Hobby by name.
Hobby, I've been hit. Was Hobby the one that said two fighters against a Star Destroyer? When Princess Leia was giving him all the, I don't know if that was Hobby or not. Anyway, I liked in Rebels how they actually had Hobby. They sprung Wedge from the Imperial Academy or whatever, and Hobby was one of them as well. It's like that was just kind of random. All right, so I guess Fredo, this is kind of appropriate given the chair that I'm sitting in. What's the predominant color in the decor of Chancellor Palpatine's quarters? However, don't let my clue give anything away. About my chair. Don't be.
I mean, that's it. You mean in Return of the Jedi?
No, because it says Chancellor Palpatine. So what's the predominant color in the decor of Chancellor Palpatine's quarters?
I almost want to go with purple.
See, I think I led you astray, but
it was black.
Red.
It's red.
Because he said. See, if it would have been Emperor Palpatine, I would have gone black, because that throne room is always in darkness.
All right, so mine. Oh, come on. At the first one I read, here we go. This is on a day that I'm wiped out tired. What's the English translation of Kuna Tuta Solo? I even made it sound like him a little bit. Yeah. Kuna Tuta Solo. I think, are you going somewhere solo, or where are you going? Yeah, going somewhere solo. Yay. Hey, at least I know that one.
McClunky.
Yeah.
What is the English translation of McClunky? All right.
Well, before we get to the news, Aaron, you want to mention the hint that you were sitting on?
Yeah, I got my Emperor's chair. This is a frivolous buy that I got. Yeah, I treated myself.
You liking it?
It's really comfy. It's too low for the desk, but it sits nice in my room. So it's good. So it's nice to sit and play guitar in. So no, it was fun.
Yeah, really. Only issue is that he's got it put against the wall, and I'm like, the whole point of that chair is you're able to spin 360.
Well,
to reveal yourself.
Like I said, it was a stressful evening to get things arranged, so it works. By the way, speaking of the whole, getting back to the whole Greedo thing, did you see that they put the original actor who played Jabba the Hutt in a Star Wars comic?
In one of the War of the Bounty Hunters
just recently, yeah. Like the Scottish dude that played him. They actually used his likeness in a comic book, so I'll let you guys look that up later. But nice. Fredo, we got some news, and so this first one I'm kind of excited about, but it doesn't say when the dang thing's coming out. I don't think so.
Well, no, because you're gonna get to tomorrow.
We're gonna get the trailer. So yeah, they'll probably say coming sometime in a galaxy near you or something like that. But anyway, go ahead.
So we got confirmation that tomorrow, Wednesday, August 25th, Gamescom's conference will have the world premiere of the Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga game. Now, it's supposed to be opening night live. It gives you, now it's weird because it's streaming West Coast time. It shows you 11 a.m. Pacific time, or PT. It's 2 p.m. Eastern, or 1 p.m. our time. So,
and Sean Payton will announce the new quarterback right after.
Exactly. So 1 o'clock our time is when the game's opening night live will start, and that's when we should be getting the trailer for Skywalker Saga, which hopefully will tell us when the dang thing is coming.
What's been the holdup? Has that been a COVID thing?
No idea. I mean, it was originally scheduled to come out fall of last year for Christmas time. It got pushed to spring of this year, which tends to happen in video games. I mean, as they're polishing and fixing stuff, if something's not right, they're usually there are two big windows to drop stuff. One spring of a year, but the primary one that everyone wants to hit is that October November window, which is right before the holiday season, because it's also usually when new systems drop, upgrades drop. So everybody knows every kid's kind of can ask their parents for one.
That's well, I guess we are. I guess I would, if I had to throw money down, I'd probably say we thought October last year, right?
About that time.
Yeah.
But then it didn't happen. They got pushed to.
Yeah, you're right. It's going to be on people's Christmas list. So yeah, you're right.
I would guess this winter, fall, before Christmas. And the thing about this that you asked, like, why do they keep pushing it back? My guess on that is that they're building it from the ground up. They're not just tacking content onto the old game, like the old Wii game or the old PlayStation 2 games even. I think they're rebuilding the thing from the ground up.
Of course, maybe I don't know. Maybe they started doing that. They started kind of tacking on. They looked and said this looked like crap.
The other thing is usually for games of this nature, kind of like this game, Madden, FIFA, they're going to go across all platforms. So you might be making one game, but it's got to be able to play in your Nintendo Switch and my PlayStation 4 and somebody else's Xbox One or PlayStation 5. So whenever you're making a game that's going to go across those platforms, you got to make sure that it works on everybody's system. Because if you're wrong, there's stories, like I'm trying to remember, there was once the last Batman Arkham game series, which was infamous because the one that came out for the consoles was perfect, but the PC port was a buggy nightmare. So you try to avoid that as much as possible. Moving on to trailer, so from one trailer that's gonna drop to one trailer that did drop, and this is not Star Wars. Everybody and their mama by now, I'm sure, has seen Spider-Man: No Way Home's release trailer that came out as we were at the Saints game yesterday.
All right, yeah. I have a question real quick. Dave, do you have the DVD of the other two Spider-Man? Spider-Man, the other two Spider-Man movies?
Yeah, well, like there's a lot.
No,
so which ones do you mean? The Tobey Maguire?
No. The Tom Holland ones.
Homecoming and Far From Home.
Yeah, but one of them walked off. I think we loaned it to somebody, and we don't know where it is.
Because I'm going to be hand to God. We haven't seen those yet because when they're on TNT, I don't want to watch them on TNT. I don't want to watch with commercials. So it's not on a streaming service. I know this is like first world problems, but anyway. So I suppose anybody out there, if you have your Spider-Man movies, that you can loan me and Brittany for a weekend, but.
Have you seen the older ones? The ones I was talking about, like the Tobey Maguire. Or
I think we saw the first one, I believe. Yeah. I mean, this trailer though looked pretty cool. Looked pretty good.
Mm-hmm. They're bringing Doctor Strange. They're leaning into the idea of the multiverse. Did you catch the cackle and the line that goes with the pumpkin bomb, Dave?
Yeah.
Hey, even I caught that one.
And then, of course, you get the big reveal of Alfred Molina back as Doc Ock, which will be interesting. I mean, all that it implies now. Our good pal Scott Colsby did point out on Twitter today saying he was glad that they didn't show either Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield in this release trailer because if you're getting Alfred Molina, you're probably getting those two guys. But it'd be nice if they could still save those.
If they're going the multiverse thing, then that's why that's okay.
But you save them for the movie. No, don't splash them on a trailer to kind of reveal they're there.
Yeah, I think unless they're just a major part of the story, like if they're in half the movie to 2/3 of the movie, then there's no reason to hold them out of the marketing. But if they show up in the third act and kind of save the day or something, then there's no way you should show them.
So is the whole thing behind this is like, well, let's what are we going to do for the new Spider-Man movie? Well, let's have Doctor Strange do a multiverse thing so we can explain why there are two other, even though we've had Into the Spider-Verse, but so we can explain within the MCU why we've got different Spider-Men. I mean,
probably.
I mean, it's just one of those things. It's like, why do DJs play a certain songs? Because they have to go pee. I mean, that's really the only reason why some songs are on the radio. They're too long, but they're good. I gotta go pee songs. So
I'll say this: I think this has been something that Sony has wanted to do for a long time, and something the fans have wanted to see for a long time, which is a film version of the Sinister Six. And so, where basically all of Spider-Man's main villains are ganging up on him. And so, like, Sony's been trying to get this set up for years now, and they've never been able to do it. And so, like, for them to decide, okay, now's the time. We're going to finally give the fans what we want. We're going to finally do this thing that we've been angling to do forever and ever and ever. This is like the smartest possible way to do that, in my opinion, because people have an emotional investment in these versions of these characters already. So you just bring them in, and you, like you say, you explain it away with the multiverse thing, and you can do whatever you want at that point. And I just think like the character building and like I said, that emotional investment that people have in those characters already, you've already done that. You've laid all that groundwork. It's like building up to the Avengers in a way. You have the separate movies that have built up to this point, and so they're kind of cheating in a way to try to get the same thing happening. But I like it. I think it's really, really smart way to go.
I'm going to be very interested to see how the Doctor Strange character is in the upcoming movies, because this trailer makes him seem like your crazy drunk uncle. And that's not he in pardon me, in Infinity War and Endgame, and it was straight as an arrow. He was all for kind of breaking some rules in Doctor Strange, but then he kind of took his position very seriously. And now it looks like he's kind of, like I said, kind of cavalier, and I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
Maybe feeling his way, maybe feeling his oats after saving the universe, that kind of thing. I will say, though, this is also a good way for Sony to try and redeem the Amazing Spider-Man movies under Andrew Garfield, which I know, particularly the second one with Paul Giamatti as Rhino and Jamie Foxx as Electro. It really, really turned off a ton of their fan base, because they were trying to use that as a springboard for the Sinister Six movie, and it just didn't work. So it's interesting that they're bringing them. Those characters might be part of the Sinister Six now, because they tend to be. It's a lot easier to bring them in as opposed to recasting them. So if you try to redeem those movies in the eyes of the fans, kind of put some of the positive stink that the Tobey Maguire movies and the Tom Holland movies got onto them, this is the easier way to do it.
And Marvel's been all up around us, because we also have trailers for, obviously Eternals, and Shang-Chi is coming out. It's like, so it's like summer break's over, kids.
Yeah. Well, they're desperate to want to get stuff back out there. I think there's still some hesitation and some fear as to, depending on the pandemic develops, that they don't want to find movie theaters closed once again. So they're hoping to get out there and people respond and react. So, but this will get them. It's coming out Christmas season, and it's an easy way to pack theaters. It's put out a Spider-Man movie.
And so my slip up was one of the classic lines from Friends. Hey, why isn't it Spider-Man? Why is it Spider-Man? Is it because it's not Phil Spider-Man? He's a Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Pig. Spider-Pig.
Spider-Pig. Spider-Pig does whatever a Spider-Pig does. Can he swing from a web? No, he can't. He's a pig.
All right. What else we got going here?
Back onto Star Wars news. Carl Weathers was doing the rounds over at Steel City Con, And some fans got to asking him about kind of what's coming up for him. And so he started talking Mandalorian season 3. And so his quote is, "We're going to start a new season of The Mandalorian in the next month. And I get to be in front of the camera again, and I get to direct again. So I hope you all stay on the lookout for it, watch it, and support it," which, end quote. And that's not really going to be a concern, but it's interesting. They already know starting in September, they're back to filming season. They're going to start filming season 3, which I think kind of confirms a bunch of the stuff we've heard. And it's interesting that he's already lined up to be one of the directors of one of the episodes for next season. Because I haven't heard of if it's just bring back the old gang of directors again, or if they're going to try to spruce up with, another Robert Rodriguez type or Taika Waititi type in there.
We've heard like 3 different reports now on the timing of this stuff, which I think like the original report like a few months back was like, we're filming right now, and I guess that's been debunked at this point because we've had 2 subsequent interviews where a guy has been gone on the record and say, yeah, that's coming up soon. We're not doing it now. The further you push it back, the further you push back the release. So now instead of next summer, we're looking at next fall. But again, I'm in favor of the quality inherent in taking your time. I think like all of us agree with that. It's like you got to take your time doing this thing to do it right.
So we've got Visions coming up, which is going to be a single day drop, I think. But then you have Book of Boba Fett in
Christmas,
December. So you're talking whether it's probably going to be 6 to 8 episodes, maybe, and then you can probably take about, you got Andor, and then you'll probably, I would guess, have Mando season 3 come after that, and then probably Obi-Wan. So I mean, I don't know.
Obi-Wan's already filming, right? So
I think they wrapped, right?
Yeah, wrapped.
Yeah, so they're more likely to
come out before.
Yeah, have it ready beforehand. And then again, Bad Batch will be coming too. It's like we're not going to be hurting for Star Wars television.
Well, and again, let's all, hey kids, remember some of us had to wait, many years between our Star Wars to get our Star Wars fix, So yeah, so I think we can all wait a few more months for The Mandalorian.
But I do wonder what having these other new shows, because it was interesting. After season 1 of Mandalorian finished, it was almost like within a month they were right back into it because they had to.
Well, they're building content, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
But now that they have all these other shows that are going to be making that content, I wonder if that gives Filoni and Favreau the opportunity to take a step back, assess kind of where they want to go, and take their time and before they get back into filming. Because again, there's no longer the you may be the firstborn, but so not the only one. So,
well, they've had over 8 months now to get their scripts right.
Right.
So, I'd say that's a positive. I'm sure they haven't been working on them the whole time, but there's little nagging thoughts that occur to you at random times, like when you're in the shower. Oh gosh, this one line of dialogue's terrible. I got to go back and change that. So, I think that can only help.
Right. Well, speaking of Star Wars content, then I'll preface this with I'm using that segue. I'll preface it by saying rumor. This is coming from the hashtag show. Their headline is Finn prequel/sequel Star Wars series in the works for Disney Plus. So you're talking about content? Here's more content. So the word on that they're talking about is saying apparently this week they can share that John Boyega's Finn may be getting an upcoming series on Disney Plus. It had previously been announced that J.D. Dillard and Matt Owens, who did Slight and Luke Cage and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., were working on a Star Wars film. Apparently the movie concept's now being repurposed as a series, and it's going to be retooled to be a longer form Disney Plus series focusing on the character of Finn. Plot details are light, but what we're told is that John Boyega will return as Finn. The series would explore his backstory, including how he came to be in the First Order. It would also show where he's going post Rise of Skywalker. The plot in the future will have ties and share a villain with his past, although no further info. And the series could be said to be a replacement for Rangers of the New Republic, which appears to have now, well, not necessarily died on the vine, it's back on the shelf for the time being.
So, I think this would be an interesting story. I think it would actually be good PR for Disney based on, the bad press that was going on earlier. I mean, I know that's besides the story. The story sounds interesting because I think the idea of, the First Order taking, children from their parents and then, brainwashing them and be stormtroopers and things like that. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the Bad Batch. But anyway, that whole thing is really good. And then obviously what he's doing as far as Jedi training, stuff like that, I think it'd be cool. Now, that being said, if I was the reporter in the room, I'd be the first one asking him, so I have a quote here of when you said, don't Disney Plus me. So, if it is all true, he's going to be eating a little bit of crow at the beginning of the press junkets.
Yeah, but he's going to be eating crow on really fancy plates made out of gold from that fat check he just cashed. So,
bingo. He's going to be fine. He's going to, like you said, he's going to just live it up because it's like, oh, they gave me a lot of money.
In the words of Anthony Mackie, they cut the check.
They cut the check.
Yeah, but still, it's like, I don't know.
No, it's fine to call that out because, again, like, this is, like, I'm going to talk down on this. I'm going to talk down on the way that Disney does their business. And yet now you're coming right back to the table for more money. And it's like, okay, it's fair to point that out. It really is. But I also feel like at the end of the day, he can do whatever he wants. I like the character. Let's see what they can do with it.
I mean, it's his career. So it's, this is still a job for him. And, if somebody comes and offers you a ton of money to do something that you can do and do well, and be well received, it's kind of hard to say, no, I don't want to do that. Yes, there is some crow that he will have to eat because there was a lot of recrimination. At the same time, though, he could always go back and say, I sat down with Kathleen and the folks over at this Lucasfilm, and we kind of hashed that out, buried all the bad feelings, and move forward. So I mean, there's room to say, look, we found common ground.
I mean, good Lord, if you look at this happens all over the entertainment industry, but studios don't care and the actors don't care, just like the record producers don't care and the artists don't care. You watch the documentary on the Eagles, and they gripe about David Geffen and how they sued David Geffen, and David Geffen sued them. And then who did Don Henley sign with when he went to do his solo stuff? David Geffen. So it's like, it's like, money cures all, all
cash rules everything around me, cream, get the money, dollar bill, y'all. To quote the Wu-Tang Clan.
With that, I don't think there's anything to follow there.
So again, we'll see where it goes from there.
But what do you guys think about the story? I mean, like I think the story idea is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, like, we kind of been around and around and around on where we left things in 9, and they didn't do that story justice.
They didn't do his story justice.
Yeah, and so they kind of left. The way that Rose got fridged and everything, there'd be an opportunity to maybe bring her back. So there's opportunities here to tell the stories of characters that people care about, that have interesting stories that we didn't get enough of in that last movie. So I'd frame it as a positive, of course. I guess I'd rather it focus in on Rey at this point, because I'm really sort of interested in what she's going to do.
Well, and one of the things that the rumor says is that at this point, there's no word on if they've reached out to either Daisy or Oscar Isaac, just to see about possibly coming back. Because it would be interesting to see.
With all due respect, I don't think Oscar Isaac needs to be involved in it, because
Well,
if I want to, with this story, I want to see it about Jedi stuff and Finn's backstory. I mean, I don't need. Yeah, I mean, I do a different show with Oscar Isaac if you're going to do something, but
Yeah, but
can
they're
do
buddies.
Look, but you can do Rangers of the New Republic if you want to do that. That'd be great for Oscar Isaac and Poe Dameron. But in terms of this story, I think
he's going to need it's not until he needs a new house. So
this is true.
Yeah,
he's got to be Moon Knight, so he can't be going back and forth like his buddy Pedro. I guess, I mean, on this story, I'm interested. Like I said, I always loved the character of Finn. I thought, like Dave said, he really got the short end of the stick regarding story development in episode 9. So giving him an opportunity, not just to give his own backstory, but to kind of see where he goes, whether it is the Jedi path or whether it's something else, whether it's, maybe going alongside Lando and trying to find where all these other former stormtroopers were absconded from. It could go in a number of ways. I trust John Boyega as an actor. He does a great role. So again, it's just like I said, more good content for Disney Plus.
Well, I tell you what, if Star Wars wants content, and here's the thing, as I'm looking at my bookshelf right now, I was thinking as we were talking about this, Marvel's got the What If, and I mentioned on the last podcast, or maybe not on the podcast, but somebody was like, what, could Star Wars What If, work? So here's what they need to do. A certain point of view. Some of those stories in the certain point of view books would make for a great Star Wars series. So you have, the timeline of A New Hope and, or the timeline of Empire Strikes Back, maybe not necessarily the Wampa story, but, it's like there are certain ones of those stories that would be really, really kind of cool, and they could be just a single episode. That's it, and then next week we're on to a different one. So anyway, there you go, Lucasfilm. I won't even charge you for it. I don't know. Well, hey, that's a story for another day. We need to have the clip of Maz Kanata saying that.
Where'd you get that?
A good question for another time.
Bad Batch. Bad Batch is done, and so like I said, we haven't. So we're not going to talk about from episode to episode. We're just going to, like I said, talk more holistically, kind of the bird's eye view of things. I guess the first question, I think, just going around the horn, like we've done the last couple episodes, like it, hate it, or meh, just kind of the season as a whole. And I'll start it off by saying I liked it. I was actually surprised by it. Bad Batch was one of those things where I was like kind of skeptical going in. And I mean, overall though, I kind of liked it. It was, it was a nice continuation of things. And we'll get more into like how it filled in some gaps in the Star Wars story, how it advanced the Star Wars story. But I mean, I like the characters. I like the animation. Yeah, I ended up enjoying the season overall. Dave? Like it, hate it, meh.
Yeah. Liked it, but I trend positive with this stuff to begin with. So like take that with a grain of salt, I guess. It's interesting to me is like I went back and I watched some of Clone Wars, the last few episodes, while we were in the middle of this season, and oh my goodness. That stuff is intense and great and phenomenal, and everybody should watch it. Those last few episodes with Anakin and Darth Maul and it's a lot. So it doesn't reach those highs. I think few things could. But I like it. And I think it has a lot of potential. I hope that it goes further. But for right now, where we are in the State of the Union, I like it.
Yeah, kind of 100 foot, 1,000 foot view. Liked it a great deal. It gave us some of the stuff that I kind of expected it was going to give us, primarily regarding around the fall of the Republic, the rise of the Empire, which I think, again, I keep saying, it's something that's not been touched upon enough. I always wanted to see how people reacted to it, because it's one thing to get it the moment it happens and see stuff happening in the Senate, but how did the galaxy wide, deal with this? And we're getting some of that. Some of the some of the arcs that are in the season kind of, went up or down in quality in terms of how much interest I had. But overall, I liked it. I liked it. I liked the show. I liked the characters. Uh, I liked kind of where they were going. It's I didn't realize that I had that many questions about what the heck happened to the clones post episode 3. Because
Right. Yeah.
by the time we come back to episode 4, ain't no clones no more. So what happened?
I think if I if I had one real big criticism, the thing that drove me bonkers, it was Tech, and I didn't dislike him as a character. I disliked the way it was so obvious they were using him as Mr. Exposition. It's like, oh, we need to explain this thing. Let's just have Tech look at his computer monitor and then spit out the exposition. It's just that was so. Well, they weren't even trying to be sly about it. But anyway, so that just to me was like, could have been a more creative way to get that information. But on the flip side of that, it's kind of a nice little Swiss Army knife to have with you. But
I dovetail off that a little bit and just say that I like certain characters a great deal, and I feel like some of these characters have been developed in an interesting way, and I can't wait to see where they go from here. And other characters, like you said, kind of one note, not learning more about them, not figuring out what their place in the universe is and where they're going to head eventually. And we're just like you said, Mr. Exposition, and then you have the big brute guy, who charges into everything. And
it seemed like they were starting to go down a route with Echo where it was like he was conflicted with what they were doing or not doing versus what he was, originally, and then it was just dropped. And so maybe it's something that'll get picked up in season 2, because he's more of soldier, not mercenary. It was so I thought there was, even though I liked it, I thought there was some not necessarily missed opportunities, but telegraphed. It's like they telegraphed a punch that they never threw. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was interesting because I thought we were going to get more of what you're describing, Aaron, and then it was almost like it was too eager to settle into the mission of the week kind of episode, which we got a few of in the middle of the season. And those are the ones that, okay, Fennec Shand and Cat Bane going at it aside. I don't necessarily know that some of those episodes, once the full series is done, there'll be ones that I'll be running back into. Like the one where we're trying to rescue Jabba's baby Rancor. I'm like, But,
Right.
So I wish we would have gotten a bit more into that development that you're describing about the characters and their, exploring their place in this new society.
But what's interesting? Okay, so I guess the let's take the the next two questions. It's hard to take my next point and separate the two, because we're going to talk about how has the Bad Batch advanced the greater Star Wars story, has it not advanced the great, has it propelled anything forward? But kind of maybe I guess the sub bullet of that is what gaps have been filled in, and that you mentioned Fennec Shand and you mentioned Jabba's Rancor.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if we're the guy with the red lines on the board, I mean, all these things are pointing to Boba Fett. You have Fennec Shand, who's, in The Mandalorian is teamed up with Boba Fett. You have Fennec Shand, who is trying to protect, Boba Fett's sister, Omega. You have, the Rancor, Jabba, he's dealing, and the Bad Batch are dealing basically with, Bib Fortuna, who Boba Fett ends up killing at the end of Mandalorian season 2. So everything's coming back to Boba Fett. I know I made the prediction that, because Fennec Shand was going to be in it, we were going to see Boba Fett. We didn't see Boba Fett, so whoever I owe $5 to, I owe $5 to. But it's like I said, if all the lines are being drawn in the center, it's, this is all coming down to Boba Fett.
Possibly. Yeah. I'm less convinced. I think they're pointing to it in a way that we've talked about this, where it's like either you're setting up Boba Fett in this series or you're setting up these supporting characters that are going to appear in the Book of Boba Fett, or both. But I think it's more the latter right now. I think that they're trying to give some backstory to some individuals who may pop up in that. And that'd be good.
And that was gonna be my point. That like I said earlier about we're just bringing in Doctor Strange so that we can explain away all this stuff. It was like very utilitarian, right? I think it seems like the Bad Batch. I don't really think that. I don't know. It really hasn't advanced the greater Star Wars story to me, but it's acting as that tool to set other things up. It's like it's preparing all of us because, and there's a little bit also explaining because, remember that, the ghost always could scramble its signal. That's why I call it the ghost. And then there's a throwaway line in the Bad Batch of, Tech showed me how to scramble a ship's signal. Oh, that's great, Hera. It's like, so we filled in that gap. We'll talk about the season finale of the Bad Batch and a huge connection that was made. I think that's what the Bad Batch is doing. It's, it's explaining what happened between the fall of the Republic and the fall of the Empire, but it's also, like I said, preparing us for these other things or explaining some things that weren't explained.
Yeah, no, and I think, I always thought that was going to be the biggest benefit outside of its own story that this show could do, is kind of connect us, because there's a good gap between the last scenes of Clone Wars season 8 and the first scenes out of Rebels, so filling in that big old, desert with stuff is part of what they can do. In terms of meeting, how's it advanced? I don't think it has advanced too much. I think what it's done particularly well this season, it's posted a lot of good questions. Like when we get to the end of season 1 and we're like, hey, where'd all the clones go? What happened to Kamino? In a weird way, even the final scene of season 1 is connected now to episode 9 in a way nobody could have imagined.
Well, that was yeah. Okay, so maybe we can talk about that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
That was a huge connection that was made to Mandalorian season 2.
Mm-hmm.
Was the if you want to call it the post-credit scene of it wasn't really post-credits, but the last scene in the finale where Lama Say they took her somewhere and she's being greeted by a dude who's wearing the same uniform as Pershing from the Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
Got the Kamino markings on his on his shoulder and everything, and even wearing the dark glasses. So I guess maybe that's the question. So what do you think they're doing here? Is season 2 now going to be setting up so we all feel better about the Rise of Skywalker and how the Emperor cloned himself?
Maybe a little bit.
Was this, and are they going to say that was always the plan, or is this, or did Rise of Skywalker come out and Dave Filoni said, "Don't worry, I got you. I got an idea."
I think it's that. Yeah, I mean, obviously, because they didn't plan half of this stuff out. But what's fun about this, right, is that what Fredo was talking about earlier, which is that I think when we came into this series, we saw, ex-military. So we thought through that prism, we'll get to understand the Empire and the occupation and those baby steps that it's taking to subjugate a galaxy. And we're getting some of that. But one of the other main characters in the show, as it turns out, is Omega. And so through her perspective and through her experiences, we're getting a lot more information about cloning, just as a big umbrella term. The Kaminoans, what they did, how that impacted the galaxy, and where that's going to lead into some of these other things. There was that one episode where we saw like Snoke-like people in vats, I mean, it looked like Snoke. I'd have to go back and watch.
To me, they look like other Kaminoans, but I mean, yeah, okay. You're right. It was very similar to what we saw in Mandalorian season 2, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and very similar to what we saw in Rise of Skywalker. So they are making a concerted effort to sort of tie this stuff in and give us more of a backstory, because it's like, oh, well, how did the Emperor come back? It's like, well, okay. Everybody is like hung up on that. I'm going to show you,
well, and that's the thing, is that it's this show is not about the Bad Batch. And I think we talked about this before. It's not about the Bad Batch. I mean, the Bad Batch is really, it's, they always said that, R2-D2 and C-3PO are like the Greek chorus. I mean, the Bad Batch for, in this time period, the Greek chorus. We're seeing, the major happenings through their eyes and their experiences. Because this show is more about, I mean, the big mystery is Omega.
Yep.
It's Omega and cloning.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else is just, they're just the vehicles to get us through that story. So I guess, go ahead, Fredo.
No, I was going to say, but what's interesting is that by putting a character like Omega with the Bad Batch, it almost juxtaposes her dynamic with the one that we know Boba's in. So I'm trying to remember when Boba was running around with Ayla and Bosk and all the other bounty hunters, and his mission was kill Mace Windu. Meanwhile, Omega is hanging out with the Bad Batch, and they're hanging out at the Sidious bars and Ord Mandel, and she's going on missions, but it's her heart, it's her positivity, it's her good nature that's winning stuff over.
Well, there's
a juxtaposition there that
bigger than life, especially. I mean, they set it up by saying Boba is Alpha and she's is Omega.
Which means we will get to see Boba Fett.
We're going to get yin and yang. Yeah. So okay, I guess let's fast forward. Do you think we're going to see old Omega in the Book of Boba Fett? Are we going to see live action Omega? Nobody wants to.
Surprised.
I would not be.
No, I wouldn't.
Again, surprised. I think this whole thing is setting us up. I mean, because everybody, I think, is expecting the Book of Boba Fett to be,
Boba Fett.
About, I don't know, yeah, Boba Fett going in town, whomping and a whooping. But it's, I think it's going to be Bad Batch season 1.5.
At the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian, you see that coda where, he walks in and, they shoot Fortuna and he takes the throne and you're like, oh, and then Book of Boba Fett's coming. And I'm like, I remember my initial reaction to that was like, well, okay, he just won. So what's the story? It's like, where is he going now? Yeah. And so I'm interested, like, on that level, it's like, well, what story could you tell?
But isn't it interesting? Because your assumption there is that that's the beginning of the story of the Book of Boba Fett. It could actually be the end.
It could be the end. That could have spoiled the ending for everybody.
But you know what I mean? Well, and it's what we all go into these shows with a lot of assumptions. I mean, the Bad Batch. Oh, it's going to be about. And then we get mad about filler episodes, and it's like, no, if you pay attention, there's a bigger. it really does seem like Star Wars is kind of reverse engineering into the Marvel model, like we talked about, instead of starting it from the get go and like, you know, Coon and Friends, you know, mapping out everybody's Netflix, you know, series and everything. Hey, I think we can do this, you know, kind of not retconning, but, you know, retroactively. We can kind of work this in now into the way we do things.
Kind of building it on,
And I don't mind
reverse.
it. I don't mind it, you know. But yeah. So
No, I think there is a there's a positivity about that because it's a different way of storytelling, but it's also one that appeals to the fan base because you're getting the answers. It's kind of how this gets sold. And no, what it is they're coming afterwards and explaining all this stuff of how it happened. I do think we probably. I mean, it'd be interesting to see if and when Omega turns up in live action, because who they'll cast and how they'll make her look to clearly denote that this is grown up Omega.
Olivia Newton-John.
Yeah, you got to get somebody Kiwi. You got to get somebody who's got the same.
She's not Kiwi, but
Well, that's the thing. You get somebody. Actually, I was gonna say, what's her name? The famous stunt actress that did Death Proof. She's Kiwi. But I was gonna say real quick. The other thing we have not heard yet is, and we haven't seen anything about, is cloning force powers and whether Omega may have any.
Yeah, and again, that's a big point of discussion with Grogu and all that. It's like, let's tap into his connection to the Force and imbue these soldiers with that. And so
the midichlorian count.
Yeah, we haven't
let's remember
gone
something
there yet.
Well, let's remember something here. Okay, so they always talk about Boba Fett or Jango Fett being the original donor, right?
Right.
However, well, I guess I don't know. I have to go back and see what the exact phrase is there. And there's a way you could probably work this out, because who was the one who actually ordered the clones? It was a Jedi Master.
Sifo Dyas, yeah.
And it was, so
Wait.
and working not with the knowledge of the council. So would it be possible that and in Attack of the Clones, they say that Jango just requested, we're kind of led to believe that Boba Fett was the only unaltered clone that was made. Well, we know that's not true now. So could it be that there was another donor that was Sifo Dyas? Maybe. And so if you want it, like I said, now I'm just pulling some stuff out of my caboose here. But I mean, if we're going to talk about, Omega being, maybe Force sensitive, it's like, well, they got to get that DNA from someplace. Maybe this is,
And remember, who did Jango Fett said hired him? It was a man named Tyrannus.
Yeah.
Count Dooku. So you could very well have Count Dooku have given a blood sample to the Kaminoans and, in the orders of his master. So it don't take much to get some midichlorians in a vial and try to figure it out.
You know what I like better as a story? Possibility here is just to think about, what if Jango has some Force sensitivity, which is why, he was not afraid of the Jedi, and he was able to sort of hold his own against Obi-Wan, and that they weren't able to transfer that to the clones because they were altered and there was no sort of transfer of that Forceness. And so that's what makes Omega so special, and that's what makes her so coveted. Again, if we're just throwing stuff out there, that's something that's occurred to me as we've been watching this, is that Omega has some kind of Force sensitivity, and they're trying to duplicate that.
So, okay. So one of the questions I had here, what other gaps were filled in? Let's look at, just like I said, in the greater Star Wars story. Like I mentioned, Hera learning how to scramble a ship signal. What other kind of gaps were filled in? I mean, a big one was the operation to replace the clones with TK troopers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been something that's been on people's minds ever since the clones showed up in episode 2. Um, and there was the longest time people thought that the stormtroopers were clones, and that was always speculation. Um,
Do you think, let me ask you this, do you think in season 2 we're going to get some really horrific horror episode where the Bad Batch lands on some distant planet where they find, for lack of a better term, a massive graveyard of clones? Or just clones ensconced in like tubes?
I really think to me it kind of makes it, for cartoon's sake, it makes a little bit more sense to, okay, let's send the clones to the place. Like, it's kind of like sending the person to, be in charge of the weather station in Siberia. It's like, we're going to send you to Kessel, or we're going to send you to, Sullust, or just places that are just, you go stand a post, and it's just, I don't know.
Yeah, because kind of one of the interesting holes that I didn't know I wanted filled out, but we got, was towards the end of the season, was the episode where they go and rescue Gregor. And the fact that, you haven't, I mean, you've seen some of the clones have second thoughts about what the Republic, now the Empire, is doing.
That was a huge scene in the finale here, was when the clone had to report that all of the all the platforms are in the ocean. That was his home. That was where he was born, and he just destroyed it, and he was just mortified.
Yeah.
That was kind of a huge moment.
Yeah, because you don't think about it, but there's this whole group of people, the clones, for whom home was Kamino. That was, they made a big deal of the fact in Clone Wars, when the Separatists invade Kamino, that Domino Squad and the rest of them were defending their home.
I think it makes a lot of sense the way that they're telling that particular story too. Like, they could have probably dragged that on further if they really wanted to, but just the fact that you didn't see Kamino affected at all by the war, really, in the movies and then the Clone Wars, and then to see what actually happens, is like, we've been told that story now. By the end of season 1, we've gotten the answer on, well, what happened to Kamino, because those guys aren't going to just like stop cloning. Like, it wasn't going to just stop. So, like, how did that get resolved? Well, now we have an answer.
Right, but also, and I think there's more to that story that's going to come regarding the clones, just because we're seeing clones challenging the Empire, we're seeing clones wanting to leave, and we're seeing clones having second thoughts. So we know they're not around as a force.
But then you also have clones like Crosshair, who have found purpose and a desire to be in the Empire, even though it's a little bit more complicated with him. But so one of the things I said here, what has been set up, I also think we've seen the beginnings of the Death Troopers that you saw in Rogue One, and it seems like Crosshair's kind of initial group. I mean, it was too similar not to maybe be the predecessors of the Death Troopers.
I think we're seeing the beginnings of the Dark Troopers a little bit, with some of this cloning stuff.
Well, and they even had them in, because Omega opened up a drawer full of them to knock somebody out.
Yeah, those training droid things. Yeah,
version 1.
Yeah, version 1.0. So yeah, that they exist at this point. So that's kind of fun to see. I love that you brought up Crosshair, because, like, to me, he's the most interesting character in the series so far, and maybe by a significant margin.
He didn't get interesting until about the last 3 episodes, maybe, because he had been kind of a one-tune pony for a while, and it was I would agree with you that it's very, very interesting, and anytime his interactions with Omega was very interesting. Sorry, I cut you off there.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. those are my two favorite characters so far, because it's like I'm fascinated by both of them. I want to know more about what makes each of them tick, and I want to know more about where they're headed. It's like where are you going to find your path in this whole story? The rest of the clones less so, but I think like with Crosshair, what's interesting to me is, like you said, he's kind of one note for a long portion of this series, but then by the end of it, I was so thankful that they didn't end the story. Like he didn't die or he didn't rejoin them. It was, I don't want what you want. At the end of the day, I don't want what you want. And like he lied about not having his inhibitor chip anymore. I mean, they might have pulled it out, but we saw that whole sequence early in the series when they said we're going to enhance the inhibitor chip rather than take it out. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming that's still the case. It may not be, but like he said that the opposite was true. He said, "Oh, they took it out." I find that kind of interesting. Like he's like, "This is what I want. This is me. I'm self-actualizing," and he's not ready to join them yet or help them yet in the way that they want him to. And yet they're on opposite sides of the conflict right now. And so there's no choice but for them to be antagonists towards each other.
So, yeah. And that is, I would agree with all of that. And it was very interesting how they kept showing, though, the humane side. He has a heart. He saved her droid. He saved her dog. It's there. He's a very complicated character. We got our alarm going off here. So I really do still. I think the overall story, though, that is being told here has everything to do with cloning, because some of the most powerful scenes are when Omega is in that lab.
Yeah.
Or when she sees the canisters on the old base when Fennec Shand and Cad Bane were running around. And then the thing at the very end here with Lama Se being, taken into, the whatever this facility is. I think that's what season 2 is going to be more about. And it's going to be, it's...
Her impact on this story is going to be a lot more important than what we're talking about in this context, which is like she's the voice of humanity for them. Mm-hmm. It's like she pulls them back to
she's their moral compass, to be sure.
Yeah. It's like you're not just these things that were created in a lab. You are people with feelings and with morals, and you have to do certain things in this universe to coexist with other people. And it's like she serves an important role in the story in that way. I think like what we've been talking about is exactly right, though. It's like eventually we're going to find out a lot more about cloning, about what her backstory is, how she fits into this stuff. And again, I kind of think it's force sensitivity, but we'll see. I don't know if... Go ahead.
We talked a lot about our thoughts. Just to wrap up, Fredo, do you want to kind of bring us into the article with the creators, just to sum up real quick?
Yeah, StarWars.com had an interview with Brad Rau and Jennifer Corbett, who are the executive producers and supervising directors and head writers of Bad Batch. So I started asking them about the show, and they go, one of the big themes of season 1 was, what is my purpose? And Jennifer Corbett goes, I think it depends on which member of the Bad Batch you ask. It's going to have a different opinion of where they stand, particularly characters like Hunter, Crosshair, Echo, and Omega. It's a show theme because the Empire taking over and the galaxy shifting and changing. So are they. So Hunter's trying to keep his squad safe. Omega's trying to learn how to survive in the world. Crosshair's trying to see if he fits in the Empire, And Echo's the one who keeps questioning Hunter. And it's interesting, she highlights Echo as the kind of the middle of the road. And Brad continues by saying they didn't want to have everyone's purpose locked in at the end of season 1. It's something they'll have to deal with in a big way as they move into season 2, because they're coming at it from their own different points of view. They also discuss about Omega being a big surprise, and just simply saying that they came up with the idea of a younger clone who needed their help, and then just how that created the idea of them being guardians. So that was kind of like original concept, but then it allowed them to be these super soldiers being out of their comfort zone because they're no longer in a military setting, they're no longer in a military environment, and they are wholly responsible for Omega. That was different from all the other, because she's a clone, but her perspective is 100% different from everybody else's. And then just finally, because it started getting into some of the interplay with the other clones, as they mentioned. One of the things that they enjoyed was how they took care to show that the clones didn't just become evil when Order 66 happened. They highlight Hauser with the Syndulas, but then they also show the clones at the start with Depa Billaba. So they admit they spoke a lot about that. They spoke about how their helmet distortion sounds was created to make them sound a bit more evil and robotic. So again, they wanted to get into the heads of the characters and say, look, the clones are fan favorites. That's what makes them so tricky. They went from being cannon fodder in the prequel movies to being fan favorites in the series, and then Order 66, and the switch gets flipped, and now they're trying to be more than just being pawns. So it's an interesting interview, and I gave the link to Dave. He wants to link it in the show notes for anybody who wants to read it. It's interesting because they're trying to come at it from a point of view of, we're not just continuing Clone Wars, we're doing something different.
But I don't think that we're wrong about how utilitarian this episode, this series is. They're not going to take us into the sausage factory, but it seems to me that that's what they're doing there. They're, like I said, filling in some gaps, but setting things up,
I just thought, like I said, that idea of getting into, because these characters, it's what makes them interesting is that they were created for a single solitary purpose, to be an army, to be soldiers. Well, now there's no war. And if anything, your choices are keep following orders and doing what everybody else is doing, kind of like Crosshair, see if you can find a spot in the new Empire, or break out on your own, like we're seeing Rex and Hunter and the rest of the Bad Batch and Gregor. Like, how do you find a place when all the skills that you know and everything that you've done no longer apply? So
we've talked about that. Mm-hmm. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm saying it creates opportunity for good stories.
I agree with that. I think when we thought about this, the concept of the story and the setting, it's like soldiers made a lot of sense because you could tie them into the geopolitical galaxy spanning stuff, right? They would have an entry point, and we would be able to hear more and learn more about how the Empire was truly formed. But then, like you said, this is the time of great change. And so it's like, well, who would be in a position to be most affected by that? And it would be the clones. It's like, well, who are we? What are we doing? We don't know. We got to try to kind of figure that out. Do we have a purpose? What is that purpose? And they're all kind of, like you said, they're figuring this out for themselves. Each character is going to arrive at a different place ultimately, and there will probably be conflicts along the way trying to figure that stuff out. But I think there is a lot of storytelling potential in that. I know that some people were kind of disappointed by Bad Batch. They thought it was maybe a little slow paced. Maybe it was a little repetitive in terms of all the clone stories. But I do think there's still a massive amount of potential in this. So I'm still kind of excited for season 2. I would rather that we move the ball further down the court, I think, in season 1. But if you think about when we were trying to put it into context of what has happened and how does this affect the overarching Star Wars story, it's well, yeah, actually some stuff has happened with Camino and with the cloning and everything else. So I think overall, I would say that we're about where we need to be, but I'm still excited about the potential. Like, I think we can still do a lot more.
That's it. How happy were you the moment Cad Bane showed up?
That was fun.
So everybody out there, you let us know what you thought about the Bad Batch as a whole for season 1. You can hit us up on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever. Yeah. So until then, I suppose we'll wrap things up and we'll say who dat?
Who dat?
Who dat?
And everybody have a great week.
McConkey.